Good morning, YouTube. Come take a walk with me. Last year, I did a couple of just little 1-minute tours of my garden on Instagram. Then, when the winter months came and the garden was bare and I was spending my days riding by the fireplace downstairs and doing homeschool there in the one little like really warm area of our house, I would watch those videos over and over and over again. And I said, next summer I'm gonna do more comprehensive garden tours and track the progress a little better. Now it is June 9th and I haven't done one yet. Just a couple of quick little videos for myself. But today is gonna be my first regular garden tour where I show you where everything is, kind of talk about why we chose to do things how we did. And I would like to do these a little more regularly through this growing season. Alright, well let's get to it. As you can see, this area is still a work in progress. This will probably be pretty different by the time I do another one of these videos, hopefully. But this will be our gate where you come in. And our garden is comprised of two parts. We have what we call the in-ground garden here, and then the garden beds over here. This year the in-ground garden was a little bit of an experiment for us, and I've actually since been reading about some different growing practices that I'm going to be implementing. Before next year we're going to do some things to get our soil amended, but this year all we did was we came in and we have really heavy clay soil, which is why we had originally opted for raised beds, but we wanted to use this space and just kind of play around and try growing some like rambling things, watermelons and, you know, winter squashes and that sort of thing. And so we just came and we tilled the rows, and we tilled in like composted bedding from our goat barns and some super soil, which is a mix of compost and sand, and then also manure from our horses. And we just tilled the individual rows with all of that stuff and tried it instead of trying to amend the entire field. And then we came in and we put down this fabric, which is, we got it on Amazon. I'll put a link to it, but it allows water through, and it has lines. We bought a 300-foot roll. And here on this row, I have a few like bush winter squashes. I am going to tell you what's planted where, but I probably am not going to be able to tell you all the varieties. It's not that I don't know them. I'm actually kind of an encyclopedia when it comes to this stuff. However, I've got like 50 varieties of heirloom tomatoes, and I think that it would probably kind of like drone on if I tried to express each and every one. But if you are interested in that stuff, like different heirloom varieties, let me know, because I would love to share that with you guys if it's something that you'd like to hear. Okay, here we have a watermelon, and then these are a couple of different winter squash varieties, which I'm very excited about. And I'm actually planning on doing some sort of trellis right here. They just haven't gotten big enough for me to have to worry about that yet. Here in this row, we've got some more melons. Down on the end, there are a few tomato plants. And then we did this one long row of tomatoes right here, which honestly was completely experimental. I just didn't even know if they would grow in this heavy soil. While they're not quite as big as some of our other ones that are in the raised beds, they're doing really well. Daniel built this trellis thing out of bamboo, which is really cool because what we were running into was that the ground was really hard. So driving one of these bamboo stakes down into the ground wasn't working. So he came up with this innovation of these teepees, and it's working wonderfully. Now here we have some more watermelons in these hills that are spaced like 9 or 10 feet apart. And then on this row there are a couple of pineapple ground cherries and a few more viney squashes and melons down this way. Here we've got 2 rows of beans. One of the rows didn't come up super well. I read that beans are a really good thing to plant if you are trying to amend heavy soils. So went ahead and put those in the ground. And down there we've got a couple of summer squash down here, like just kind of bush variety. I can't, there are 3 different varieties of summer squash. Along the end, we planted sunflowers, and some of them are starting to come up, but they are really getting choked out by weeds. Like, that's a sunflower. I'm not entirely sure that those are going to work well. However, the ones that we did down here on this end are doing a lot better, and I feel like the weeds are a little more manageable. The plants are getting big enough down here that I think we're going to be able to mulch and save them. I'm not sure about these. They might be kind of sporadic. I think it's just because people walk here, and so they might have gotten stepped on. Here we have one single row of glass gem corn. We had decided not to do a whole lot of corn this year because it is so space consuming. And in this, we planted Clemson spineless okra, and only one came up. So we're going to replant that here maybe today. Everything in the in-ground garden is doing way better than I expected it to, honestly. And with the things that we're planning to do to amend the soil for next year, I'm very excited about the prospect of having that much more viable garden space to do those big kind of space intensive things. We're actually talking, and I know this is crazy, because right here where I'm walking you through, it's almost 1/4 of an acre. This is, I can't remember exactly what it is. It's something like 10,000 square feet of space. Now that's including, like, that's raised beds, and that's including all the walkways and stuff between them. However, you know, we're really filling this out. I can so much. We're actually using what comes out of this garden and sharing it with friends and family. But we're planning on the possibility of doing some more in the backyard over the course of the next few years, now that we're learning about some different ways to amend soil and use in-ground space. Okay, so this is just like the first garden bed. Now this little thing here, because you're wondering what it is. When we were using these posts, these are cedar posts that we used for our beds, some of them had the most interesting patterning, and I really hope you can see this. Can you see all these lines? And it was just some bugs had bored through it, and I thought it was the most fascinating thing. The whole thing is covered in this wonderful pattern. And so Jeremiah, actually, these were just the posts that we built the corner of this bed with, and Jeremiah, he made this so that we could kind of keep that cool little thing. And so we're going to hang hooks on here, and this is going to be just a place to put hand tools and that sort of thing. And I might put some sort of like cutesy sign. You're going to notice that our beds are really diversified in what's planted in them. I did opt to do a lot of companion planting. I did a lot of research about what plants benefit from each other, different herbs that help with pest control and that sort of thing. I also just think it's really beautiful to have kind of a mix. So I do have some like long rows of tomatoes in areas where there are a lot of peppers together, but I did choose to mix things up. Another benefit is that I save seeds, and so just kind of having things mixed up helps to guarantee that there's no cross-pollination, although that's not the only thing we do. We do take some other measures to keep from things being cross-pollinated. Okay, back to the beds. We've got some peppers, there's some herbs, borage, and some thyme. Now on this side of this trellis, there are more Keuka melons, which I have another area where they're growing, and they're really still very small, and they're taking a long time taking off, so hopefully these will end up doing okay. Down this way we made one trellis out of the 7-foot fencing, and I've got about 10 plants, maybe 12 tomato plants planted here. These are just random things that I wanted to go ahead and grow some more of, and I had this space. On the other side of that, I've got some random things, eggplants, some rare beans that I got from a swap, a couple of chocolate bell peppers, another eggplant, and then down here are some really neat beans I got from like a rare seed company, some nasturtium, and then a few more tomato plants right here. And marigolds are kind of spotted throughout here, and a couple of pepper plants I'm not entirely sure are going to make it. You'll notice on these first 3 beds that there's a lot of open space, which I had a lot of pepper plants fail this year. They just didn't do very well. So I decided, kind of after it was all said and done, that I was going to just leave those spaces open. I may come in and plug in some like zinnias and calendula and some different flowers just to add color, but these are going to be the areas that come August and September that I go ahead and sow my cool weather stuff. I'm going to do a lot of carrots and beets and radishes, all of that sort of thing once it gets closer to the fall. And now I'm just going to leave those spaces open to have a place to put that stuff, or sow something like flowers that will come and be pretty much done by the time I'm ready to sow those things. Okay, on the second bed is where we started with our cattle panel trellises that I did a video showing whenever we were building those. And on this side of this bed, there is a lot of open space. We got some borage and edamame, so all of this is open. Here's some beans, marigolds, several little pepper plants, more peppers. All of this is just kind of spaced out. Here's some eggplants, another like a Chinese 5-color pepper. This is this first archway, and the reason why I planted Keuka melons on this side and this here was because I really want to save these seeds. So I planted, I gave them some space between them and any other beans to try to make sure that they end up being what I want them to be. I got these seeds from a man in Wales. We were talking on a Facebook group, and he has been growing this variety of beans for 50 years in his garden there in Wales. And they're huge. They look seriously like they might grow a beanstalk. The beans are about this big, and I'm so excited about these. I cannot wait for. I've got a couple of flowers, so I'm gonna save those seeds and hopefully develop that into something that I can grow regularly in my garden. Here in the third bed, I guess I can just walk you guys down and show you my tomatoes. Now, you'll see these little bags on some of the tomato plants. I mentioned the measures that we take for cross-pollination. Now, what you can do when you're wanting to save seeds from an heirloom tomato plant and you want to make sure that you don't end up with a cross. Now, if you don't care about having a cross, don't do this, because you can save seeds from heirlooms and get a really cool cross-pollinated hybrid with, you know, the heirloom that's next to it, and you're still gonna have a good tomato. However, if you plant, like right here, this is a white beauty tomato. If you plant this and you wanna save the seed and you wanna guarantee that the next year, when you plant that seed, you get a white beauty tomato, you're gonna have to do something for cross-pollination. Most tomatoes don't cross. So you have pretty good chances if you save your seeds of getting what you want. However, there's always a chance that a bee or, you know, like a really windy day could have carried the spores from another plant to this one and pollinated its flowers. So what we do is we take these little party favor bags that you get like for weddings, you know, like they're just the little mesh bags that have a drawstring, and before the flowers open, you just slide that down over and tighten it. So now what happens is I have a bunch of flowers in this bag that when they open, the only pollen that they're going to have access to is their own from that plant. And so those flowers will pollinate each other. I come through and every day I'll just give it just a little shake to make sure there's some movement going on in there, just in case it's not windy enough to move it in there. And then once these flowers set their fruit, I'll take this bag off and I'll tie a ribbon around it so I know. And when it gets ripe, I can harvest those particular fruits, and I know that those fruits have seeds that are guaranteed pollinated by this plant. Therefore, they are pure heirloom seeds. So down these rows, I have something like I can't remember exactly how many varieties I ended up doing, like 47 or 50 something, I can't remember, but it's a lot. And we've had a little bit of pest, so that one's got a hole in it. But I love tomatoes. I love to eat them. I also find the stories of heirlooms completely fascinating. So I'm involved in some groups that work to preserve different heirlooms and grow out rare varieties. So a lot of the plants that I grow are not ones that the seeds are very readily available. And I do save a lot of seeds to do trading and swapping and that sort of thing, because this is kind of something of a hobby for me. Okay, this first bed, when you enter, there are a few tomatoes there. That's actually a variety called Atomic Grape that is my daughter's favorite, so I put those there for her as her own little special tomato spot. We've got some nasturtiums, peppers, there's a row of zinnias, which I thought that I might plant to be able to cut flowers for the table, but so far I've just left them growing down here because I enjoy the color. One lone head of Marvel of Four Seasons lettuce, which seems to be doing okay even in the heat. This was a beautiful winter squash that succumbed to bacterial wilt due to cucumber beetles. And that is just part of trying to grow naturally, is sometimes you lose things. There's a giant marigold, barrage, which is huge. Some of my barrage got really big and some of it didn't. On this, there's a few more tomato plants there. These are really neat. This is a pink potted bean. So instead of like a green bean, it's a pink bean. It's got a lot of flowers. The plants themselves have not looked super healthy throughout this season. But I'm really hoping to get some, oh look, a little baby. Cool. More peppers, more nasturtium, and I think we'll go this way. Down this row of this bed, it's very similar to the other three. A lot of peppers struggled, so there's a lot of really small plants. Again, I'm just leaving space. There's one little section down there of some beans, but the rest of some bush beans, but the rest of this are different pepper varieties, and then there is barrage and marigolds spotted throughout that. This bed is getting a little bit overgrown. I put one tiny little holy basil plant in here, and it's just completely taken over. I'm actually going to be cutting that back some and dehydrating it to save for medicinal purposes, because clearly it's just going to take over this bed if I don't. There are some pepper plants in here, a barrage that's gotten really big, more peppers. That's Calendula. On this trellis is, it's called a Kajari Melon, which is a small melon that originates from Punjab, but it's about this big. Like, I mean, it's like kind of a personal size. So I'm trying to grow that on a trellis. I've never grown melons on a trellis. I'm not 100% sold that I like that method, but what you do is you put them in a bag and pin them up once they set fruit. So we'll just see how that goes. I don't know yet. Here's a couple of tomatoes, Paul Robinson variety, which I was really excited about, so I gave it its own little special spot to be the star of this bed. Some basil. Oh, look at that booger. That is a cucumber beetle. Organic gardening means picking bugs off and stomping them in the garden like on the regular. This trellis has yard-long beans, and on this side is still also the Kajari Melon. So this will grow up, and it's doing pretty well getting up there. It's mounding a lot at the bottom, and it's starting to spill over. And maybe I should prune it, but I don't really know. Dragon tongue bush beans on that side. I just stuck like a sunflower in the corner of some of these beds just because I thought it would be pretty. And I do still think it would be. Look at that. It's starting to get a little bit of a head there. This area right here is, I think this year, this is my favorite little area of the garden. I just love how diverse it is and how well it's doing. There's big sunflowers in the corners of these beds. These are mammoth sunflowers. They get like 12 feet tall. It might not have been a great idea to put them in these beds, but I think it's going to be okay. It's all just really an experiment. This was the tomato I was most looking forward to, so I gave it its own little place. It's called Climbing Triple Crop. It is an heirloom, and they're supposed to vine like up to 15 feet and produce a ton. And they are looking pretty promising with the fruit that they're setting. They've got a lot of fruit set. I'll show you over here. Like, and they're good size. A lot of times the real high producers just produce small little globe fruits. And I like tomato sandwiches, so I don't want little fruits. I've got a few varieties of cucumbers here on this trellis. I have been so shocked to learn that many people don't trellis their cucumbers. I've always done that. I didn't know that you would do it any other way, because it makes such a huge difference in, one, getting healthy fruit, two, the ease of being able to harvest it. This is an Armenian white snake cucumber. These, if you grow them on the ground, they curl real bad, but if you grow them upright, they get, you know, long and straight. So, a little bee friend. Bees love cucumber plants. More sunflower. Let's see. On this side, we've got 3 okra plants. Last year was my first year to ever grow okra. I actually didn't know how it grew. I wouldn't have been able to tell you exactly how it grew. But if you've never grown okra, it grows into these huge, like, tree bushes. And they're massive. Last year, we have really good soil in these beds. And, I mean, they just towered above me. Their stalks were, like, this big around. So, I made sure to give them plenty of space this year. These are, they're like 35 inches apart, 30 inches apart right here. So they're gonna have plenty of space to branch out. Again, there's borage stuck right back in there. I read that borage is beneficial to plant around tomatoes and that it repels tomato hornworms. Now, I spent last night going through the garden with some of my friends, and we picked off about 10 hornworms, which is not good. It's also not bad, because last year I used to pick off like 50 in an evening sometimes. So maybe it's working, I don't know yet. The jury's still out on that. There's the okra getting big and beautiful. Here's a few pepper plants. A seasoning pepper called Arroz con Pollo. And then my cute little rooster. And on the other side of this bed, I planted these 2 sunflowers here in this space, just because I wanted to see. Because with sunflowers, essentially they get as big as they have space to get. And so as you can see, that one that's alone, it's the same variety as these, but that one's alone and these are close together, so it's significantly larger. I don't know, I was just curious how that would work. Here's some zinnias because they make me happy, borage, and 3 purple tomatillos, which are totally like beast moding out in this garden. And this is 2 green tomatillos right here, which they choked out the peppers that were in this bed. Last year I planted 6 tomatillos this close together. Which, by the way, last year I planted things way too close together. I'm talking like I didn't get a tomatillo last year because they were so close together they turned into a tomatillo jungle and dropped all their fruit because they couldn't get enough water and nutrition. So this year with 2 in this, you know, 5 by 5 foot bed, I was hoping that it would be better, but they filled this bed up, so we'll see. Hopefully I get tomatillos this year because I want salsa verde. This beautiful plant is a jelly melon, which is kind of like a novelty. It's like a cucumber, and it's got spikes and this like kiwi green gel inside. It's not setting any flowers yet though. It's just massive and beautiful. I mean, like, this plant is majestic. This is only like, I think I put 4 seeds in this 5 by 5 foot bed, like 1 on each corner of this thing. And it's gotten that big. And I stuck a barrage in there because I had started way too much of it. And I just was like, you get a barrage, and you get a barrage, and you get a barrage, and you get a barrage. It's everywhere. Do y'all like my little garden scooters we got at Sam's Club? We bought them last year. And they're really nice, especially whenever the garden's actually weeded enough to do it. My kids come down here and snack. Somebody was eating a cucumber. This whole row, these are all cherry tomatoes and grapes, small ones. I planted all of my tomatoes in these beds 2 feet apart with the intention of heavily pruning, which I did really great at keeping up with over there on the slicers, which is honestly where it is the most important, because if you don't prune them enough and you put them too close together, they don't reach their full potential and how large fruit that they put out. They might be a variety that's capable of putting out 2-pound fruits, but if you've got them crowded, they just can't get the nutrition that they need to do that. I did not keep up with pruning the cherry tomatoes. Now they grow kind of wild anyway, and I did prune them some. I mean, this is not just like completely unpruned, but they're pretty berserk right now. So like there are places where I've got little stakes sticking out, kind of holding them from falling out in the rows. And at this point I've kind of decided to just let them do their thing. We've not harvested any yet, but I think we're very close. We've got several that are the right size, and so we're just waiting for them to turn colors. Looking good. Cherries generally do ripen before, you know, beefsteaks and that sort of thing. So these will generally be your first tomatoes to harvest. And I'm pretty sure that we will be pulling cherries off of these plants probably within the next 10 days or so. Okay, here we've got okra. Now, I put a video up just like, I think it was like a week or 2 ago, of the boys and I harvesting some radishes. This is actually the bed where we were harvesting them from. What I'll do a lot of times, like when I planted these okra at the same time that I planted those radishes. Now, these were started plants from the greenhouse, so they're about this tall. And I knew I had a month or so, 6 weeks, until they got this size. So all here in the middle, we planted, oh, I don't know, probably 100 or so, maybe more, radish seeds. And we got a whole harvest of radishes out of this space before the okra got so big that it's shading. Now I won't plant anything there because this okra is going to completely shade that space. Here on the end, on this little teepee trellis, I've got Keuka melons, or they're also called Mexican sour gherkins. And let's see if I can get this to focus. You can see they're just tiny little things right now, but when they're full grown, they're about this big, and they look like little tiny watermelons, and they're sour little cucumbers. And I'm kind of just growing them because they're cute, but I also had the idea of making really neat little pickles that would look awesome on like a, you know, like a meat and cheese spread. So I planted those, and I thought they were gonna die. But so then I put those other ones in that I showed you when we first got in the garden, thinking, well, I really wanted some of these. And then these guys just took off. So I might end up with just like a deluge of Keuka melons. In which case we'll pickle them and it'll be fine. We'll just eat them all year. On this side of the trellis, there's a couple of tomato plants. After I was kind of done putting everything in, I had so many tomato plants started in my greenhouse that I sort of just came in and plugged them in everywhere that there was space. And when I pulled out things that were sowed during the winter, like peas and different greens and stuff, when they started to bolt, I just filled in the space with tomatoes because I already had the plants, so I didn't have to spend any more money. Here we have a beautiful, this is a, oh, there's a little bee. A round zucchini. The name is French and I'm Arkansan, so I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I think it's Rondinise, I don't know. I want to show one to you, but we've harvested them yesterday. I guess that'll have to be on the next garden tour. This trellis, one of these sides is banana melon, one is, it's called Collective Farm Woman melon, but it's very small. So trellis melons, again, experiment. Those are 2 tomatoes. That is a lemon cucumber. And down here were my beautiful purple peas, which are done producing, so I pulled them and planted some half-runner pole beans. This next trellis is beans. There's a couple different varieties of pole beans here. I did have things in between these, but they were peppers that didn't do well. My peppers just were awful this year, but I just haven't filled those spaces in, like, because this melon is starting to ramble. I just figured I would let it. There was a crookneck squash right there. It also succumbed to that bacterial wilt, so I pulled it out, and I will replant that. Here's another space that's empty because of things not doing super well. Oh, and there's my precious. This is an warded Incan cream puff squash. I got the seeds from a friend of mine on Instagram, and that is one seed. It's one plant, and I'm very excited to see how it goes. The fruit of that is just gorgeous, and it's supposed to be wonderful. Squash does not just like super readily grow up. Now it does have the same little tendrils that you find on like cucumbers, and so it will wrap around things and grow up if you train it, but it's not going to just naturally grab hold and take off the way like a bean would, a runner bean. Last year I had actually watched some stuff on Pinterest and different bloggers that had taken bush squashes like zucchini and they had trellised them up, and I tried to do that and it was a miserable failure. I will never try to do that again. I'm gonna let those bush because they do fine. You know, there's no reason to undo it. They don't take up a bunch of space. I mean, they're big, but they're not like evasive. Just give them their room. However, for a winter squash, this looks magical. So that's like a benefit of doing it this way. The other reason is these things can go like 15 feet and 20 feet sometimes. So putting it on a trellis kind of gives the opportunity to save space and keep the fruit up off the ground. Now these are big squash, so I am gonna have to use like produce bags or something. I'm thinking like mesh bags. Some people use pantyhose, and you just put the fruit in and you attach it with like a clip to the trellis to support the weight so it doesn't break off. Here in this section, I've got some beans. I think these are like borlotti beans. I can't remember off the top of my head. Here I've got some ground cherries on the end of this area, in this area. Ground cherries are essentially like the cherry tomato version of a tomatillo. So it's like a cherry tomatillo. And you just use them like fruit. So I planted all those. I'm gonna make like jams and chutneys and that sort of thing out of it. I've got these square 4-foot beds here on the end. I showed you the jelly melon and the tomatillo. That is a like a patty pan squash. Now in these 4-foot beds, I did 2 plants. So you can see they do take up a lot of space. And I think probably next time I'm just gonna do 1 plant instead of doing 2, because they might end up being detrimental to one another. More tomatoes, filled up some space. I experimented here with using some of that garden fabric, which it's doing okay. The weeds are just growing up all around it. Here I've got some blueberries in these 2 beds. And down here on this end is mint and lemon balm. And I just leave them to their own vices, because these are very invasive cousins, essentially. They're in the same family. We've harvested this back twice. It's still huge. We've got bags of it dried in the house, and I'll just keep harvesting it. I do attempt to do things as naturally as possible. I say a lot of times I do organic gardening. I'm not certified organic, and I couldn't be, because like at the beginning of the year we did bring in some poison to kill ants and some different things, and we didn't like broadcast spray it, but we did little stakes, and that kind of puts me out as far as being organic. However, there are some things that I will spray with different neem oils and different things like that, but there are some things like this mint that I don't spray with anything, because we like to put it in our water when we're working in the garden. Same thing with like the cherry tomatoes, the gherkin cucumbers, the things that I know that my kids are going to come down and just put in their mouth. I'll generally try not to spray with anything at all. All along the wall here, we did these boxes to do potatoes in, but I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm pretty sure I did it wrong, because we were gonna like mound them up, but then I got the wrong variety. So I don't know, we'll just see if we get any potatoes. I'm not gonna try to teach you how to do that though, because I don't even know what I'm doing. Here we've got some cucumbers. Look at those guys down there. They're looking good. And some cabbages, which look like lace because bugs are jerks. They are getting a little bit of a head, but they've got nice holes all in it. Some of those just completely failed. A few beets. This trellis is all cucumbers of, I think it's a couple different varieties. I can't remember. I'd have to look at my notes. Beans, tomato, more beans. All of these trellises are beans. Because look how pretty that is. More tomatoes. That was like another instance of like just putting some in to fill a hole. Okay, we've got more tomatoes, more puny cabbages, more tomatoes. Peppers over here on this side. Some of which, like, look at this. That little thing has been like this big for 2 months, and I guess it's deciding to join us now in the party. Glad to see that. Beans. And on these pole beans, like, half of them are like fresh eating. You know, green beans of different varieties, like Kentucky Wonder Pole. One I think is called like Busy Homesteader. They're just like ones that you'll pick. We'll pick and eat green or can. And then half of them are dried beans. So we'll just leave them on to dry, and then we'll pick them and shell them dry for saving for, you know, like into the winter to eat in soups and that sort of thing. One of these, I think this one is Lima Beans. Down here I've got some Scarlet Runners. Some of these that I showed you were Eye of the Goat and Skunk beans, which are dried beans. This first trellis here, green beans. So when I'm like beans, 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 they're all different kinds for all different purposes. More peppers on this side, which are doing much better. Those are ones I bought, not ones I started. Scarlet Runner beans. More peppers here. And we're stepping now into the area that this was my winter garden. This was the stuff I started like back in February. We do have a couple of pepper plants here. This is kale, which I'm about to pick some of and take up to the house to juice. These were peas, but they have, they're done. I've pulled them out. This is salad greens, which I'm actually going to be pulling these out probably today, maybe, if I get to it. Don't be surprised if they're still there in the next tour. Tomatoes that I filled in, this was carrots, but we've just stuck some tomatoes in here. More kale. Those are morning glories, just because that'll be really pretty. This trellis did have peas on it, but I took it out. I'll probably go ahead and throw some green beans on there. And over here I have this Marvel of Four Seasons lettuce, which is starting to bolt. And I'm going to see if I can save the seeds to that. And then these flowers are Calendula, which have been wonderfully productive. They're not quite open yet. Whenever these open up today, I'll go ahead and harvest these. I've already got like a quart dried just from these 4 plants. Here's another instance where I just threw a tomato in where there was space. That was carrots, and after I harvested them, tomato got a new home. Compost, kale, Swiss chard here in the middle, rainbow chard getting sort of choked out by this monster kale. Tomatoes, these were carrots, now they're tomatoes. These were peas. This side is not currently planted. And I might not plant it. I might just leave it and then put peas there again when it starts cooling off. On that side, those are our Gherkin Cucumbers. And these guys have been wildly productive. You can just see them right there. I mean, already, I came out here last night and they were not that big. You almost have to harvest these twice a day, because otherwise you end up with, well, not gherkins. Here, underneath these gherkins, I've planted sweet alyssum, which is supposed to be a habitat for some beneficial bugs. A few more okra plants. This was another area where we had a lot of radishes that have already come to maturity and harvest. They ended up bolting. And then a little more kale on this side, because apparently I thought we didn't have enough of that. That is something that volunteered from last year. I think it's a cross. I think something happened, because it's kind of like basil, but it's kind of not. I don't know. If you know what this is, tell me. I did have a purple opal basil in this bed, but this is not it. I don't know what this is, but it's something, so I haven't pulled it out yet. Okay, so that concludes our garden tour for June the 9th. Let me know in the comments how often you would like to see the progress. At this point, I think that it would be reasonable to do weekly tours. And I'm thinking of my winter self, because in January I will be desperate to walk through this garden, and that will be kind of like my lifeline. However, things are changing so fast in just a few days. I wish I had started these earlier so that we could have more of a comparison of what's already just exploded just in the last couple weeks. So we'll be back to walk you guys through it again in a week or so, and obviously we'll have more videos up between now and then. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Until next time, bye.